I'm Tracy from MeatRx, and today we're continuing with our MeatRx podcast stories. We have a guest today, Anastacia. Hello, Anastacia.
Hey, everybody.
It's great to have you, and can you tell us about what your life was like before Carnivore?
Yes, I'd love to. Before Carnivore, I was eating a Paleolithic style diet. And before that, going back into my youth, I was eating probably the worst version of a standard American diet. I grew up in a household where there were candy bowls on every table. I never served myself a meal in my life until I went to college. So the plates were stacked with tons and tons of carbohydrates and whatever we were being served. And if it wasn't eating at home, which was a rare occasion, I typically was driven through a drive-through because of the busy schedule my mom and dad kept. And I was being run around with my sisters and brothers to different activities. So they just thought it was convenient to just drive us through somewhere to eat most of the time. And so I grew up basically on a fast food diet, high carbs and lots of sugar. And food was never something in my house that was ever limited. It was always looked at like, you better make sure you eat. You got to eat. You got to eat. So my relationship with food really started early on, and I watched my mom also be a chronic dieter, which led into some of my issues that I've had around food, which is really what ultimately first brought me to carnivore. But so I got into my teenage years and I started experimenting with eating disorders. Initially, it was like under my control, where I was just restricting food and only eating certain things. And eventually that turned into like a binge and purge eating disorder. And my whole life was out of control when I was a teenager. I felt hormonally out of balance. As the hormones with the teen years came, I just felt really out of control and I didn't feel like I was understood. And I suffered from some depression. And my parents actually didn't know what was wrong with me. And so their solution was, because I wasn't communicating, was to send me away to a facility that was for drug addicts. And I really wasn't a drug addict at that time. I hadn't even experimented with much, but I did on the weekends experiment with some alcohol and some marijuana, but I wasn't a drug addict. And my parents, like I said, sincerely didn't know what I was going through emotionally and mentally and socially. I had insecurities as a young teen, and the result was depression and isolation and withdrawal. And so they sent me away, and that's when my relationship with food changed even on a deeper level, because I was isolated from everybody that I knew and that cared about me at all. And I felt like I was on an island, and I was trapped basically in a rehab that was not as intense as like a prison, but I lived in foster homes. And it was really, really traumatic for me to be ripped out of this middle-class home and environment to this place where I had no control over anything I ever decided to do. And so food became the one thing in this rehab that nobody ever cared what we ate. And so I would binge while I lived at these foster homes. I would binge when I was at these programs. And it was the one thing I had control over in my mind, and it changed my mental state. It did give me some kind of comfort away from the pain and suffering that I had. So eventually I was out of that rehab, and I graduated high school, thankfully, after I'd missed many months of school. And I graduated and I moved on to college, where I struggled in college again with eating disorders, more so on the bulimia side of things, because at that time I wasn't willing to just binge and keep all of that mass amount of calories and food in my system. And so binging and purging became my way of managing the intake of food and calories. I should mention that I've always been athletic and into sports, at least at that point in time. Training like in a gym for aesthetics wasn't as popular as as it is now for younger people. And so I was always just an athlete, but with the food addiction problems, I I really just became really withdrawn, and I did over exercise also. So I used exercise as in an extreme way to manage my weight and my emotions. And I sought out therapy several times in college to kind of see if I could get some help with the out of control eating patterns and emotional things that I was suffering from and depression. And maybe I wasn't totally ready, but it just wasn't coming all together for me. I also really didn't understand hormones and health and the things like that as I do today. So I did end up graduating with an undergraduate in experimental psychology because I was interested in the motivation behind people's behavior. And I thought I was going to go into clinical psychology. Um, and I also was interested in law. So I ended up graduating with my psychology degree and then got a paralegal degree on top of that and worked in law for a couple of years, which I did not enjoy necessarily being a paralegal. I didn't feel like I was creative enough, and I didn't feel like I was able to really make a difference and feel like I had purpose and meaning when I woke up in the morning and interacted with the world. So I ended up moving out of the paralegal field because I was picked up by a company that found me, and I worked as a lobbyist in government work for a couple of years, and I was diagnosed with cancer at age 28. And at that point, I was still in the bulimia and overeating. I had sought out help with overeaters. I was doing some Overeaters Anonymous, and that was okay. It was a place to go that was safe, but it wasn't enough for me because I wasn't really changing the way I was eating, aside from the mentality of going to chicken breast and low fat salads. I mean, that's what I was doing because that's what I thought was healthy, but I was always struggling to just maintain that kind of diet. And I would always go back to binging and purging. So once I had cancer, I was diagnosed with cancer. I It was one of the best things that probably ever happened to me. There was a lot of suffering and a lot of stress and change, and there was physical changes to my body because I was a breast cancer survivor, so I had to go through lots of surgeries in order to remove the cancer from my chest wall. So there's a lot of traumatic things. I lost every bit of my long hair, was completely gone. I was bald, and for the first time in my life, when I was done with cancer treatment, I looked at my health differently. And I was grateful for that because it made me reevaluate what true health was. And when I did have cancer and was going through chemo, I got really interested in meditation at that point, even some gentle yoga, because I was really physically fatigued. So my athletic side of me was not able to use that as an outlet when I was going through cancer treatment because I was so fatigued. So I didn't have that. I did also some art therapy that was really helpful. And one of the first things I changed around my wellness after cancer was because I was a breast cancer survivor. I was told that I shouldn't use deodorant with aluminum and titanium in it. And I know this doesn't relate to food, but it does because it was the first thing that I chose to change in my life that was going to help me long term, not just for an aesthetic, look to be skinny. I wanted to prevent this from ever happening again. How could I start to change? And so it started with what I put on my body at first. And I just removed all the chemicals and the toxins from my cabinets. And then I started reevaluating also my fitness. I quit running as much. I was an overexerciser, so I ran a lot. And I was suffering from overuse injuries at that time after, right before I was diagnosed with cancer. So instead of going back to running, I actually started weightlifting. And I was told by one of my oncologists at that time when I had cancer that I would never lift heavy weights with my left arm because that was the side I had breast cancer on, and I had very little lymph nodes left on that side of my body, so I should not lift too heavy. So of course I was out there lifting after cancer. I think the day after my last chemo, I was doing intervals on a bike and lifting in a gym with one arm on my right side that was still cancer free. And so I got into weightlifting, and I really saw like some mental changes and some body changes, which inspired me to continue and motivated me to, seek better health. I still was struggling with the food aspect though, because I was still in this restrictive mindset, in this lower fat. I can't eat that much. And I'd always had this enormous, like, lioness appetite where I could sit down, and it was probably environmental from being a kid where we would sit down and have these massive amounts of food. And so I always was this volume eater. I was eating for volume. So my salads were these big ass salads, like as huge of a bowl as I could get. And it was filled with kale and chard and every vegetable you could think of. And then I would have some olive oil and healthy fat and nuts and seeds as I moved into more of a paleo diet. And that was primarily how I've been eating. And after cancer, I did go back to graduate school, and I got my master's in physiology and in wellness. And that really helped me get into what I'm doing today, which is I'm acting as a health coach inside of corporations. And I do some one-on-one coaching. I do some health science writing. And I actually own a business where I do some emergency responder fitness testing and training. But after I got my master's degree, I had a stronger understanding of physiology and how our bodies worked, and everything just kind of eventually led to the next thing that I delved into deeper. And as I got more into the paleo way of eating and learned about Rob Wolf's work and Lauren Cordain, I just knew I was going down the right hole of like help for myself. And paleo did help. I started that in 2012, and the being able to eat a large volume of food was really important for me because it did allow me to have some satiety, and the volume of fiber I was eating was helping with satiety and slowing down the binges. So instead of it being more of like a daily struggle, it became like I would say a monthly struggle, like bi-weekly. And even around my cycle as a woman, I was struggling a lot more than other times of the month. But I was still finding myself overeating a lot on a paleo diet. I was overeating nut butters. I was overeating, Quest bars and protein shakes and, always everything. I was always regulating. I would allow myself to eat what I wanted, and then I would restrict again. And so I was just finding I could overeat basically anything. And I tried keto maybe 4 years ago for 1 week. And I didn't know I could do high protein keto. So I was trying to do like this high fat keto. And I just felt like I was eating cream cheese and butter all the time. And I wasn't having that volume of food like that really brought me satiety. So I gave up on that and went back to paleo. And at this point in time, about 4 years ago, I was suffering from some really, really chronic facet joint arthritis in my spine. And I'd been into lifting for many years. After I had cancer, I got into weightlifting, and I got into actually figure competitions, like somewhat of a bodybuilding style kind of competitions. I was doing bench press competitions. I was really into fitness. I became a personal trainer during graduate school. So fitness was really my thing too, but I was getting all these overuse injuries. And so it started with really severe back inflammation, and the back inflammation was debilitating, where I was applying for federal aid because I couldn't afford to work as a trainer anymore. And I hadn't started working full time as a health coach. And so I was really frightened, actually more frightened than I was of my cancer diagnosis, because I was debilitated to where I couldn't stand or sit or do anything for any length of period of time. And I had this chronic pain all the time. And it just went on and on. And the chronic pain, I've tried posture classes, and I've way educated myself in every soft tissue technique and everything I could do physically to improve my biomechanics and my health. And I was really going down the high vegetables, and the antioxidants to, curcumin and turmeric and all these things to get the pain to go away. And I could never really get it to completely go away, even when it did start getting a little better after a couple years where I was having less chronic pain. Um, and then about a year and a half ago, I was on a trip to Tampa with my husband, and I was suffering from some severe IBS symptoms, or I call it rock gut, where my intestines after I would eat would feel like I had stones and rocks cramping in my gut. And we were staying at a hotel that did breakfast complimentary every morning. And in the morning, it was bacon and eggs for me, and I had asked the, people at the restaurant, there's nothing else in the bacon and eggs, right? It's just pure meat and eggs. And they said yes. So that meal was fine. But every time I ate out when we were at restaurants, I would have to go back to the hotel after lunch or dinner and basically lay down because my gut was so bloated and I was so much in discomfort. And so when I came home, I told my husband, I said, when I get home, I'm not eating anything but protein because I don't know. I feel sick. I'm sick. And so I came home and I just ate like bacon and eggs for 2 days. And I had some beef jerky. I remember some Epic jerky that didn't have any sugar or anything in it. And within a week, I had no back pain. My IBS went away within a couple days. So my gut felt better within like a day and a half to 2 days. I lost a lot of like the inflammation weight I was carrying that I had no idea I was even carrying. So that was around 10 pounds. In about 3 weeks, I probably lost that 10 pounds. I really don't think it was maybe partially fat, but it was primarily, I think, inflammation I was carrying in the body. And so when I really pulled all those vegetables out and all the fiber out, I started to have less pain, and that was so motivating for me to have less pain. On top of it, I was finding satiety. And at this point, after several weeks, I had found the carnivore group, the women's carnivore group online. I had found Sean Baker's work. I've always been kind of a nerd and listened to podcasts like way more than I should probably. I need more music in my life just to let go and not be so myopic sometimes into the health and wellness field. But I really was looking to optimize my wellness. And so I found that I could eat volumes of food. And I started primarily just doing it with lots of beef, eggs, water, soda water I would drink. And I was eating like really fatty stuff in the beginning too. And that really helped with that satiety and shut the eating disorder side of me down, which in my mind was the first time in my life I've never had the thought where I had to be focused on food all the time. Like I can go and I can eat a large volume, lion-like volume of food and not think about it for 6 to 7 hours. And I thought about it when I was paleo because I'd heard about people that have too much variety in their diet. And I knew I was one of those people that I am an abstainer, not a moderator. Moderation did not work for me. And I knew that from a long time ago with the food history I have and the tendencies I have, that wasn't going to work for me. And I'm okay with abstaining because if I do tend to allow myself certain things, I've done a cheese experiment off and on as a carnivore. And the cheese experiment has not been successful for me because I can't keep cheese in my house. My weight goes up by 10 pounds in a month. And I'm addicted to cheese after several days. Again, I'm like, cheese, where's the cheese? I gotta have it, And I'm like, this is crazy. And I'm going to my therapist talking about how do I get off the cheese again, But I know how to do it. And I do have those tools. And I just go back to eating primarily meat, to reset. And then again, I'll play with my ratios and things like that as I kind of get rid of that craving sensation for the cheese again. But yeah,
You
that's
sound like me. You sound like me. I'm an abstainer too. And the cheese is difficult for sure. I
yeah.
was wondering too, when you implemented carnivore, it sounded like you did it on your own, which was really amazing. And then you noticed it
Yeah,
better.
initially it was not like I started the challenge because everyone else started. You know, I read Zero Carb a couple of years before that, with Amber O'Hearn stuff. But I just thought it was completely like wild. Like, no, I could never just eat meat. That doesn't even sound right. So like most people, I brushed it off the first time I ever read anything about it. But yeah, I was fed up with chronic IBS at that time and just bloating and discomfort, and the fact that I couldn't do things after I ate out at a restaurant because maybe I was being exposed to some vegetable oil or some gluten, or, you know, and I pulled that stuff out before. So I do have to be careful when I eat out. But when I've always been gravitated toward protein. I've never really ever experimented with veganism. I've experimented with lower protein and high volumes of vegetables, but I've always been a meat eater. I've always felt like dung if I removed meat from my diet, whether it was any protein. When I say meat, I just mean animal protein. You know, I've never, ever, ever felt optimal and good with no protein in my diet for a day. So, and I'm Neanderthal. I have like a high percentage of Neanderthal genes too. So I always think about my ancestors and having Neander Valley, you know, we ate a lot of meat and beef and, you know, so it just works. It works for my genes. It works for my body. It works for squashing that, you know, craving for food constantly. And it really, um, yeah, it's helped immensely. It's changed my life.
Did you have any difficulties at all with when you first started, like in the first month or anything?
Yeah, so some of the things that you also hear about other people saying, I was coming from a paleo diet, so I was eating low carb, but I'd say probably between more like 75 to 100 grams of carbs a day. I wasn't coming from keto, so I wasn't truly fat adapted, and most of all my carbs at that point were coming from vegetables. I hadn't eaten bread or anything like that in a really long time, unless it was on a binge. And those were always like short and temporary, and then I would reset and restrict and get back to paleo as quick as I could. So realistically, I was just eating vegetables, nuts and seeds, and oils, healthy oils, and plants. So when I adapted, I did have a transition with the fat because, like I said, I went really high fat, with the fat in the meat. I wasn't like adding butter necessarily, but I was eating like 85, 15 beef primarily. It was cheap, and I was eating ribeyes, and I was eating the fattiest cuts of meat I could get. So I did have loose like stools. I had some cramping. I didn't get the keto flu, I think because I was low carb enough. Um, yeah, it was probably just mainly the bathroom stuff.
Oh, okay. Did you ever get really tired or?
You know, I didn't feel really tired. I always thought I had good energy before. Um, but now, and for the most part, unless I work a really long day or, something really crappy has happened to me, I have like an enormous amount of energy. My lifts in the gym, even with my chronic back inflammation, although it's, a year and a half later, I would say it's 98% gone. And if I feel any sensitivity in my nerves in my back, it's typically just a response to trying something new in the gym, or it's only maybe a night, and then it's better the next day. And I do prioritize sleep. I have for a long time. I'm one of the people that like wear earplugs, eye masks, blackout shades. I turn off the phones and the cellular devices and things like that. So the sleep and the recovery has always been a friend to me also. But basically I'm stronger. I did lose about 4% body fat. I was around 25%, 24 to 25%. When I started. So I lost a few percentages of body fat. On average, I lost about 10 pounds. at one point in the past 6 months, I was down another 8 pounds. So I was down 18 pounds, but I was restricting like the amount of protein I was eating. And so I did that, and then I did a cheese experiment, and I'm back up to my 10-pound weight loss. So, I am trying to actually experiment a little bit with my ratio of fat to protein again to see if I can get, myself a little bit lower in body fat again. But I also will make, if I do a leaner day or a leaner meal, I'll go back to a fattier meal the second meal or the next day. I don't find it sustainable for me to eat lean in general.
So most of your health conditions improved then, or all of them did, or?
Yeah, well, I have no more IBS unless I'm accidentally braving like the idea of trying a sauce or something at a restaurant, and then definitely regret it, because I definitely always have IBS if I do that. But for the most part, I don't at home. I have no digestive issues. My bowels are regular. They're not as, like they used to be, but I don't miss, you know, that necessarily. I feel great. I don't feel bloated. My chronic pain, I actually have a left labral tear in my hip, and I have a meniscus tear in my right knee, basically from training. But I manage those. I've never had surgery yet on both of those. And I managed that pain a lot through just my diet. And the labral tear pain went dramatically down. And I'm able to, modify my workouts, but still push my body with some intensity and in maintaining muscle mass and my health that way and mindset. My sleep didn't change much at all. Like I said, I've always been like a sleep snob. And my sleep is about the same. I guess I do feel a little bit more like when I get up in the morning, I guess I can get away with a little bit less, not much, but maybe like 30 minutes to an hour. It won't make as much of a difference, but I'm usually 7 to 8 hours every single night, regardless of what's going on most of the time in my life. Pretty consistent with that. Like I said, my exercise improved, my recovery improved. So I did hear Sean Baker and other athletes talking about that. And that amazed me because I'm 44 this week. So as someone in my 40s, the older I've gotten, the more time it would take me to recover. Like I would work out before I went carnivore, and it would take me 4 days to feel like I wasn't in an inflammatory state. And, of course, I was doing big primary lifts, like squats and deadlifts and things like that. Now I can work out. I work out most days of the week. I'd say 5, and just to be like healthy for my perimenopausal, hormonal crazy swings I get. I try not to overdo it because I have that tendency to be an over exerciser. So I tend to give myself 2 days rest where I just do walking days, and I do pretty much full body workouts. A little bit, changed my workouts from when I was in my 20s and 30s to more higher reps, slow, time under tension type of training. Basically just maintaining the muscle mass I have. And definitely stressful on my body, but in a good way. Yeah, my mindset, my mood, my depression. I do live in an area where we have less than optimal sun. And if I could change anything, yes, I would love to be in a place where it's sunnier all year round. But I do live in the Northeast, and I do suffer a little bit from the seasonal effect of changes. And that's a struggle sometimes. It really is. So I do a lot of mental work too, maintain my mental health, a lot of mindset stuff, a lot of writing, journal, reflection. I really do. I spend a lot of time taking care of myself, but as a health coach, I feel like that is my life purpose, is to work on myself so I can be living a meaningful life and living a life of purpose and giving to others and sharing. And I just don't think I could do that to the capacity with the clear head and the history that I have without taking care of myself optimally.
Wow, that's amazing. And I loved hearing your story, Anastacia. And I think that there will be many people to benefit from what you're saying. And I know you help a lot of people with your health coaching and everything. And we sure appreciate you being here and sharing your information with us and your story. You've come a long way.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate being able to share, and I always tell people, I mean, I've actually thought about really taking the plunge and being a carnivore coach too, because I'm so passionate about it. And when I'm in health coaching sessions with clients, it's really hard for me to hold back. On like not necessarily pushing the carnivore diet, because I do think people, you have to meet them where they are, but talking to people about getting rid of sugar and refined carbohydrates and vegetable oils, and how the biggest needle mover is your diet when you start to want to make a change. But I'll meet people wherever they are. If they want to change sleep and that's their easy on-ramp into behavior change, let's do it. Let's optimize your sleep. And maybe then you'll see some changes. You know, I just got done with a sugar detox at one of my sites that I work at. And it is the most fulfilling thing in the world to, even if you have like 50 people sign up for something and only like 5 people, and I don't say only in that like it's limited, but that's a big deal. Like if I can just share and let someone experience what we can experience, I just think, hey, they might go back to their other way of eating, but they might keep one little aspect of what they learned about their body and how to eat. And then if they do it again, they might keep gravitating toward, hey, that worked for me, I should go back to that. You know, so I just think planting seeds are really important with people, and you know, living by example. I think that's the biggest thing we can do, is just, you know, find what works for you. It works for me today. I did want to, if I could take one more moment, I wanted to share a little bit about my blood work, because I do think what works for us is important for us to find individually. But if some people may know what a lean mass hyperresponder is with my blood work, I have definitely a very, very, very high total cholesterol, but LDL cholesterol response to eating this way. Although I was a high cholesterol Paleolithic eater, I was in the 250s with a paleo diet with a higher LDL, with an optimal HDL and a very low triglycerides when I started the carnivore diet. So my numbers were pretty good. I never worried about it. I never took a statin. But with the carnivore diet, I have seen my LDL, it's up in near 500. My total cholesterol is a little over 600. My triglycerides are about the same. But because, you know, that I've had that response, I've been working with my naturopathic doctor actually, and, you know, doing blood work every 3 to 4 months since I've started the carnivore diet. I've actually had a particle breakdown of my LDL cholesterol, because I did want a clearer picture of like the particle and density size and the ratio of those. So that's been helpful. I haven't had a coronary artery calcium scan. I'm 44. I'm not a male. I don't have any other lifestyle factors and risk for it, because I do fall into, you know, the category of all these other positive things, which is great. But to be honest, there is a little apprehension, not about the carnivore diet, but just about like, wow, what's going on, you know? And I have had 23andMe DNA testing done many years ago. I had that done. So I do know I have a variant for the ApoB gene. And, you know, so I am someone who, eating a high fat diet, if I ate a high fat standard American diet, I would be at a higher propensity to be overweight. But since I'm eating a high fat carnivore ketogenic style diet, I'm not necessarily overweight, but I've seen the cholesterol change response. So that's kind of what I'm working on today, is kind of delving into trying to find maybe some more answers to what's going on inside of me, and any kind of long-term or changes in my vascular system that may be going on. So I think the next journey for me is going to be reaching out to low carb cardiologist, and maybe doing a coronary artery calcium scan to just kind of see, for my own peace of mind, what's going on, knowing I'm not a great processor of fat. Yeah, so that's the last thing I guess I'd say is that there are changes in our cholesterol eating this way. And if people are out there and they have an abnormally high response like me, it's definitely something worth. I don't ignore it and go, I'm carnivore to the end. I have experimented with a little bit different types of proteins in my diet since I've seen this very high response. So over the last year and a half, I've incorporated olive oil into my diet. I'm doing more omega-3 fatty acids, um, just supplement wise, or fish. So I've changed that. I've gone to more like dark meat turkey, sometimes mixed with my ground beef. So I'm experimenting with some of my fat ratios to try to get liquid fats out of my diet and not using butter if I don't have to. And I haven't fortunately seen changes. So that kind of makes me wonder, well, I guess it's not making that big of a difference, but we'll see. I'm on the journey, and I'm not willing to give up on something that provides me with so much health and wellness and relief from the food addiction and focus that I'm not willing to give it up. And I'm willing to alter things and change things. And supplement wise, I have incorporated some psyllium supplement into my diet post meal to just kind of help the bile and move through of some of the fats. But who's to say? I don't see a lot of research supporting that. I'm just, experimenting with that stuff. But besides that, I really don't take a lot of supplements at all. A little bit of magnesium and a lot of pink Himalayan sea salt, I food and seasoning and things like that. But yeah, so I guess I just wanted to share that in case people wonder, because I do think there's a lot of people out there that are afraid of the cholesterol. And then when you're a person like me, who's less of a percentage of this we're not, most people this doesn't happen to, but it does happen to people. And there is a community, Dave Feldman's group on Facebook is a good resource for people that are hyper responders in cholesterol. And that's a good source to go to. And any of the low carb cardiologists that are interviewed and stuff, I think most of them are willing to take appointments and do some remote health coaching and blood work analyzing with us. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that, Anastacia. That is very beneficial for people to know. And I love that you said that, we try to meet people where they are, and we can't be dogmatic about things, so
No.
I appreciate everything you've shared with us. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me, and thank you so much for your time.
Oh, sure. We'll see you.
See you.